Hello students, let us start discussing on the first chapter of second PUC, which is electrostatic charges and fields. Now basically it's also taken as electric charges and fields. Now, whenever we take certain substance, that substance can possess different properties. Like certain substance can have its own mass and can have its own temperature, can have its own internal energy when it comes to gases. Similarly, one more special property of a certain substance which gives rise to a new kind of force in it. That itself is what we are going to discuss now, which is the electric charge, which is the property of the substance which gives rise to electric forces between two charged bodies. Now, this is the part of the physics where we are going to discuss about charges in rest. Okay. So, yeah, we need to understand what are charges. Before that, you can visualize charges as something like a ball or a body which has additional property from the rest of the normal bodies. Now, here this chapter is of a branch which is electrostatics, where we are going to study charges at rest. Now, it all starts with amber, when rubbed with wool cloth, acquired a special property to attract lighter materials. So this goes back to 600 BC in Greece, somewhere in Greece, where amber was found to attract lighter particles when it was rubbed with wool cloth. And now this is a special property which human being did not observe in any other material, because there might be the knowledge of magnetism, but magnets always attract. You don't need to rub them, or you don't need to do any physical phenomena so that they acquire the property to attract. Here, in the case of amber, one needs to rub the amber so that it gains the property to attract lighter particles. So this is something new. Okay, and at the same time, thunder and all, lightning and all were the curious concepts for us. Now, this amber attracting the lighter particles upon rubbing, okay, it only gains the property to attract only when you rub the amber with the wool cloth. The same kind of experiment and observations were made with different substances. Before that, the origin of the name electron, electrostatics and all is actually from the same amber, which is referred as electron. Okay, this amber is referred as electron in Greece, in the language Greek language. So Greece. So this is the origin from where the concept of electrostatics or electrical field started with. Now, as I say, it all started with amber. Later, in place of amber and wool cloth, various other pair of substances were tried for the same procedure. Some other, they might have chosen random things, but out of all of them, a few of them again showed the same property of attracting the lighter particles upon rubbing with certain cloth. Now, this is something even you can experience when you rub your scale or pen to your hair for a while and bring that rubbed scale or the pen closer to small paper pieces, it actually attracts them, right? You can observe it. Now, the same experiment was done with a different pair of substances. Out of them, few of the pair were successful. One of the pair which produced the same effect and an additional property which we will discuss along with attracting lighter particles, it also exhibited one more property. We'll discuss on it. One of the pair that was chosen other than amber and wool cloth is as follows, which is glass rod and silk cloth. So when someone rubbed glass rod with a silk cloth, glass rod acquired the property to attract lighter particles, right? Now this glass rod doesn't only acquire the property of attracting lighter particles, it also acquired a property to repel the other glass rod which is also rubbed with the silk cloth. So now assume that you have two freely suspended glass rods and we rub them with silk cloths. When we do so, these two rubbed glass rods brought closer to each other tend to repel away from each other. When they repel away, the force which is responsible for this repulsion itself is taken as electrostatic force. Now, this is one of the property which we observe when glass rod and silk cloth were rubbed with each other. This is one observation, and one more observation was when a rubbed glass rod, I'll refer that as GR, glass rod. When a rubbed glass rod and rubbed silk cloth were brought in contact, okay, once assume that I have a glass rod and a silk cloth, I rub them with each other. Now both of them have acquired the property like this repelling or attracting lighter particles, and once I bring them close to each other or once I bring them in contact with each other, the glass rod and the silk cloth, they lose the property to attract or repel. Okay, so before they are brought into contact, the rubbed glass rod and the rubbed silk cloth, they tend to attract each other. This is the observation that is obtained when the rubbed glass rod and silk cloth was brought closer to each other. They tend to attract each other, and once they are brought in contact, okay, once they are touched, they lose the property to attract, lose the property of attraction once they are brought in contact. Okay, and similarly, not only the glass rods repel each other, but also two rubbed silk cloths, okay, both of them must be rubbed with two different glass rods or the same rod, that's not the problem. Now once two rubbed silk cloth were brought closer to each other, they also tend to repel each other. So these are the observations that were made when a glass rod and silk cloth were rubbed with each other. Now all of them has got their own reasons. We need to explore what is the basic reason behind all these observations, right? Okay, and along with the glass rod and the silk cloth, one more pair chosen was as follows: a plastic rod and cat's fur. When a plastic rod is rubbed with cat's fur, the same kind of observations were noted as of the glass rod and the silk cloth. Whatever the phenomena that happened with glass rod and the silk cloth, like two rubbed glass rod repelled, here also two plastic rods repelled. Two rubbed silk cloths repelled. Here also two rubbed cat's fur repelled. A rubbed glass rod and a rubbed silk cloth attract each other. Similarly here, a rubbed plastic rod and a rubbed cat's fur attract each other. The same kind of observations were made, and once the rubbed plastic rod and rubbed cat's fur were brought in contact, they lose the property to attract. Now, this phenomena, after all these observations, one might have thought like, okay, if we are bringing the same kind of rubbed substances, they will repel, the different kind of rubbed substance might attract. This is the assumption one might have made, but that was not the actual answer, because once, okay, so for two rubbed, say two similar rubbed substances, same substances brought closer to each other will repel. Okay, glass rod repel, glass rod silk cloth attract, plastic rod repel, plastic rod cat's fur attract. Okay, so one might have thought, okay, if it is same substance, they will repel, the different substance will attract after rubbing. But that is also not right, because once a rubbed glass rod, okay, and a rubbed plastic rod were brought in were brought closer to each other, even though they are different materials, they actually tend to attract each other. Okay, this is okay, fine. This is what the previous observation was. There are different materials and attracting. Fine. Now, a rubbed glass rod and a rubbed cat's fur brought closer to each other. Now, even though they are different materials, obviously they are rubbed with different, with their own pair. After rubbing, when glass rod and the cat's fur were brought closer to each other, even though they are different materials, they tend to repel each other. Okay, so this doesn't give the conclusion, or this breaks the conclusion that if it is same substance, they will repel, if it is different substance, they will attract, because this is a glass rod and cat's fur, they are actually different materials and are actually repelling. Okay, so when all these observations were studied by an American scientist, Benjamin Franklin, he gave us the idea of charge. He assigned two values for this charge. One is positive charge and the other is negative charge. Okay, so Benjamin Franklin suggested that after rubbing, each body will acquire a property to attract. Right, this is what we know, and this property of acquiring the charge, acquiring the ability to attract or repel or gain the electrostatic force, it is taken as charging of the body. Okay, so when glass rod and silk cloth are rubbed with each other, we say that both of them got charged. Okay, even in the case of plastic rod and the cat's fur, once they are rubbed with each other, both of them got charged. Now, what kind of charge did they acquire is the question. This question was answered by, or an idea of positive and negative charge is given by Benjamin Franklin, who suggested that after rubbing from glass rod and silk cloth, one of the substance or one of the material will acquire a positive charge, and the corresponding other substance of the pair will acquire a negative charge. And he himself assumed that glass rod will acquire positive charge after rubbing and silk cloth will acquire a negative charge after rubbing. Now, what happens with plastic rod and the cat's fur? He did not go for getting the idea of plastic rod and cat's fur directly. Instead, what he assumed is that he made one more basic law, which is like charges repel each other and unlike charges attract each other. Like means positive positive, negative negative. Unlike means positive and a negative charge. So here from the observation, what we observed was a rubbed glass rod and a rubbed plastic rod attract towards each other, which means they are unlike in nature. Okay, and we have already taken that glass rod is positively charged, and hence plastic rod must have acquired a negative charge. So this gives us the idea that now plastic rod has acquired negative charge after rubbing, and here glass rod, yes, it always acquires positive charge, and the pair of plastic rod, which is cat's fur, would have acquired the exact opposite charge as of the plastic rod. Since the plastic rod has acquired negative charge, cat's fur is expected to acquire positive charge. So now cat's fur and the glass rod has got the same charge in them. They are like charges, they tend to repel each other. So cat's fur will acquire a positive charge. So this idea of charging the body in two ways, after rubbing, glass rod acquiring positive charge, silk cloth acquiring negative charge, this idea gives us the basis for so many observations that we saw till now, right from the first observation of glass rod and the silk cloth. This gives us the conclusion for, or the basis for all those phenomena. Along with this charging, one more basic idea is like charges repel each other and unlike charges attract each other. So this is the conclusion, or this is the basis which gives us the idea for which gives us the proof for all the phenomena or all the observations that we made. Let us go back to the observations and compare with the final conclusion. A rubbed glass rod positively charged, another rubbed glass rod is also positively charged, so they are like charges repel, right? That is what we have observed. A rubbed plastic rod negatively charged, another rubbed plastic rod negatively charged, they repel. A rubbed glass rod positively charged, a rubbed silk cloth negatively charged. Positive, negative, unlike, attract. This is what we have observed, right? And this is the conclusion and this is the basis. Now one can get to know that when you rub a glass rod with the silk cloth for a longer time, it's expected to acquire the property in a larger way or in a larger amount, which means it will get charged to larger extent. So if I rub a glass rod with the silk cloth for say 10 seconds, it might acquire certain charge. And if I rub the same glass rod with the same silk cloth for say 20-30 seconds, obviously it would acquire more charge than the previous one. And now for every quantity we need a measurement, or we need a scale to get to know that how much charge, how much quantity do we have. For example, mass, we have weighing scales. Once we put any substance on weighing scale, weighing scale shows us the mass of the substance, right? Similarly, we need a scale, or we need a device to measure the amount of charge present in a charged body. Okay, and one of the very basic device which was initially designed to compare the charge in two bodies. Okay, like it actually cannot measure how much exact charge present on the charged bodies, but yes, it can compare two charged bodies, which one has larger charge, which one has lesser charge. Okay. Now the device is called electroscope. Since it made use of gold leaf, this is also referred as gold leaf electroscope. Now let us look at the construction of gold leaf electroscope first. Before that, this is the device used to, or device for comparing charge on two charged bodies. And along with this, it can obviously check whether a body is charged or not. Now let us look into the construction of gold leaf electroscope. Gold leaf electroscope consists of a glass jar. Okay. In some references, they have used a rectangular jar, rectangular glass slab, but not the slab, rectangular shaped one, the container. In some reference, they have taken a jar shaped one. Okay, I am taking the jar shaped one. Now this is a glass jar fitted with a rubber cap with a small hole in it. Okay, glass rod, depressurized, or we can say, yeah, maintaining absolute vacuum is difficult, somewhat depressurized. Fine. So glass rod with the rubber cap, through which a hole in the rubber cap through which a metal rod runs into the glass jar. Okay, this is the metal rod, on top of which we have a metal bob. Okay, so this is a metal bob, and this is a metal rod, and this is glass jar, and you have rubber cap for the jar. And the very important part of this is what we put here. Here we put gold leaf. What do you mean by gold leaf? It's a sheet of gold, say in rectangular shape, rubbed, folded in the middle of it, like say assuming that this is the sheet of gold. Okay, say of this much. Yeah, if this is the gold sheet that I have chosen, then this gold sheet is folded in the middle like this to make this shape. Okay. Now when this shape, the gold leaf of this shape is attached to the lower end of the metal rod running through the glass jar. The upper end is fitted with a metal bob. Okay. Now when a charged body like a rubbed glass rod is brought in contact with the gold leaf electroscope. Okay, this is gold leaf electroscope as a whole. Now I am bringing rubbed glass rod, which is positively charged, we know that, in contact with the metal bob. Charges from the glass rod flow into the gold leaf through this metal bob and the metal rod. So these charges, upon bringing the glass rod in contact, will get transferred to the gold leaf here through this metal bob and metal rod. So they come and acquire on both the leaves of the gold leaf, both the leaves of the gold. So once they come and deposit on the gold leaf, since both the leaves of the gold has got the same charge, they tend to repel, right? Now more the charge that has come into the gold leaf, more the repulsion would be, and hence more the divergence. Lesser the charge that has come into the gold leaf, lesser the repulsion, and hence lesser the divergence. No charge came into the gold leaf, no repulsion, it stays as it is, no divergence. That is how a gold leaf electroscope works. So now, as we say, it can actually compare the amount of charge on two bodies, two charged bodies. Say this is first glass rod that I brought in contact with the metal bulb of the electroscope, that made the gold leaf diverge by certain angle, say 50 degree. Now I brought one more glass rod which is also rubbed, which means it's also charged, in contact with the metal bulb of the gold leaf electroscope, the new one, and it got diverged for say 30 degrees. Now obviously the first one has got more charge, had more charge in it, that is why the gold leaf diverged more. So now we have successfully compared two charge bodies. The first of our example has got more charge in it. That is how we can compare charged amount of charge on two charged bodies. Not only comparing amount of charge on two bodies, yes, obviously we can check whether the body is charged or not. If there is no divergence, no charge in it. Now we can also use gold leaf electroscope to check the kind of charge on a particular charged body, with a condition for this. Now, what is the condition needed to check the kind of charge on a body? A gold leaf electroscope that we have should be charged previously with a charge which is known to us. For example, like we all now know that glass rod is always positively charged when we rub it with the silk cloth. So once we'll bring the glass rod in contact with the metal bulb, the gold leaf will diverge. Once the gold leaf has diverged, now it is fixed that this gold leaf has got positive charge in it, right? We'll remove the glass rod. If we do not bring the glass jar or metal part of the glass rod in contact with earth, this gold leaf will stay in its diverged state because it has positive charge deposited in it. Now this kind of arrangement shall be made use to determine what kind of charge is present on other bodies. Like assume that I brought plastic rod in contact with previously charged electroscope, which is positively charged electroscope. A plastic rod, rubbed plastic rod, charged plastic rod brought in contact with the positively charged gold leaf electroscope. Now what is expected to happen? So the body which is brought in contact with the metal bulb has got certain kind of charge which we don't know. Let us assume we don't know what is the kind of charge present on plastic rod, but we do know that the electroscope is positively charged. Once I bring this plastic rod in contact with the positively charged electroscope, the observation that was made is the divergence of the gold leaf actually decreased. What do you mean by that? So the positive charge of the gold leaf is lost due to the negative charge that has entered into it. So when you have positive charge and negative charged bodies in contact, they will actually neutralize each other, right? Similarly, here it was already positively charged, you brought plastic rod in contact with previously charged one, the divergence decreased, which means the amount of positive charge deposited on this gold leaf actually decreased. Now that makes us to conclude that the plastic rod is negatively charged because the divergence decreased. Okay. Now if I bring one more body, say another plastic rod itself or cat's fur from the previous example, in contact with the same positively charged electroscope. Same positively charged electroscope. This time we are bringing one more substance or body like a cat's fur. So when I bring cat's fur in contact with the metal bob of the previously charged gold leaf electroscope, the leaves of the gold leaf of the electroscope tend to diverge more from their actual state. So in the previous example of plastic rod, the divergence decreased. Here for this particular body, cat's fur, the divergence actually increased, which means that why does the divergence is increasing, which means more positive charge is coming into the gold leaf. From where does it come from? It's actually coming from cat's fur. So more the positive charge coming into the cat's fur, more the divergence is. So that means now we can actually conclude that the cat's fur has acquired a positive charge, had positive charge, because of which the leaf of the electroscope, the divergence of the gold leaf increased. Okay, so this is how we can actually check the kind of charge in a body using gold leaf electroscope which is previously charged. Concluding it, if I bring negatively charged body in contact with positively charged gold leaf electroscope, the divergence decreases. If I bring a positively charged body in contact with the positively charged gold leaf electroscope, the divergence increases. So these observations of increase or decrease in the divergence will give us the idea of what kind of charge is present on the body that is brought in contact with the metal bob of the gold leaf electroscope. Let us see how does conductors and insulators can be understood using the concept of charges. Conductors are those substances or materials which allow the charges to flow through them, or which offer very less resistance, very less opposition for the flow of electric current. And insulators are those substances which offer very high opposition resistance to the flow of electric current through them. Now, what makes them acquire the property when we look in a microscopic way into the conductors and insulators in the atomic scale of them? Now, for now I will be taking solids for the discussion. Both insulators and conductors can be found in solid state. How are the substances look like, solid substances look like in the atomic scale? When we go into the atomic scale, say you have one atom situated in its lattice or position inside the conductor or insulator. Okay, if this is one of the atom, the other atom will be spaced at a considerably good distance from the previous atom. So these two atoms inside a conductor or insulator will have sufficient space between them, like 2 angstrom, 3 angstrom and all. Now, even though solids are the densest one among states or different states of matter, they do have interatomic space. Now, when it comes to insulators, these atoms individually, okay, has got electrons revolving around a nucleus situated at the center. So, since you have all studied the structure of atom in your previous classes, you will be aware that the nucleus situated at the center of the atom is always positively charged, and the electrons revolving around it are negatively charged. Now, this kind of positive charge situated and negatively charged electrons moving around it itself what makes an entire atom. Now you assume one more same kind of atom, one more, which makes a line of atoms. Now you assume the same line extended into second dimension, 2 dimension, that's makes sheet of atoms with interatomic space even now, and you extend the sheet in third dimension, which makes the exact picture of the atomic level view of an atom, view of an insulator. Now all the electrons are revolving around its own nucleus, their own nucleus. That is how insulator look like. Okay, so this is atoms, electrons revolving. We have positive charged and negatively charged electrons revolving around them, right? Then what is the difference between this insulator and the conductor? The basic difference is that even the conductor will be of same arrangement. There will be atoms which has interatomic space. There will be nucleus in the center of the atom and electrons revolving around that nucleus. In addition to this, in conductors there are certain free electrons out of their atom and moving in the interatomic space. So they have the ability to move in a random way in the interatomic space of the substance. So that is what makes them conductors, because these electrons themselves are the one which carry the energy when the potential difference is applied and they start to move, and that is what is electric current. We'll discuss that later. Now, for now, the basic difference is that electrons are free to move in the interatomic space when it comes to conductors, and when it comes to insulators there are no such free electrons. It's only the electrons which are stuck to their parent nuclei. Okay, so this is the basic difference of conductors and insulators. How does the atomic view of the conductor, atomic scale view of conductors and insulators look like? Now this view helps us to understand the electronic theory of charging, which means when we rub a glass rod and a silk cloth, what is actually happening in the level of electrons, protons or atoms. That is what we are going to discuss now and understand. So when it comes to electronic theory of charging, when it comes to electronic theory of charging, when a glass rod is rubbed with silk cloth, glass rod acquires positive charge and silk cloth acquires negative charge. The electronic theory suggests that glass rod is actually losing the electrons, which means the few electrons are jumping from glass rod and to the silk cloth. So glass rod is losing the electron and silk cloth is gaining the electron. Before glass rod and silk cloth were rubbed with each other, okay, glass rod before the glass rod and the silk cloth were rubbed with each other, both of them has equal amount of charges in it, equal amount of positive and negative charge. Positive charge corresponds to nucleus and the negative charge corresponds to electron. Similarly with the silk cloth, this positive charge corresponds to nucleus and hence this positive charge cannot move inside the solid. It's only the electrons which are left out for the movement. Now when we rub them with each other, few electrons from the glass rod will jump to the silk cloth, which makes the positive charge dominate in the glass rod and the negative charge dominate in the silk cloth. That is what makes a silk cloth negatively charged and a glass rod positively charged. The same thing is applicable for plastic rod and the cat spur. Since the plastic rod is acquiring negative charge, which means that it is actually gaining the electrons. The cat spur is acquiring positive charge, which means it's actually losing the electrons, right? So this is about electronic theory of charging. The basic idea is the body which loses the electron becomes positively charged and the body which gains the electron becomes negatively charged, and the particular pair has to be chosen based on the valency. That is how it works. If the valency is not matching, or the valency is not as of the requirement, we cannot see the charging happening even when we rub two bodies. Like this chalk piece and some random cloth rubbed with each other will not produce any charged bodies. This won't get charged, this won't get charged, because their valency is not as expected. But here glass rod and silk cloth has got the valency in such a way that they can actually share the charges upon rubbing. Now let us understand one more electrical phenomena, which is earthing, or also referred as grounding. The phenomena of sharing the charges with the earth is called earthing or grounding. So when it comes to earth, earth can be assumed as a ocean of charges. Like any amount of charge can be sent into it, and any amount of charge can be taken out of it, right? Or we can say any kind of charge can be sent into earth. That's also fine. So what is actually happening what will actually happen when we bring a charged body in contact with the earth, or directly in contact, or connect the charged body using a metallic wire to the earth? What actually happens is, whenever you bring a charged body in contact with the earth or through a metallic wire to the earth, all the charges from the charged body will flow into the earth, and the body will become neutralized. This body will lose the charge. The charge might be positive and negative, it always loses the charge. Okay, so if this is a glass rod, this will lose its positive charge. If it is a plastic rod, this will also lose its negative charge to the earth. Now what's actually happening when a plastic rod loses its charge? The excess electrons present on the plastic rod are actually going into the earth. And what's actually happening when a glass rod is brought in contact with the earth? Few electrons, positive charge is getting transferred to the earth. That is right. What's actually happening when a positive charge getting transferred to the earth? Physically, electrons are taken out of the earth into the glass rod, so that these electrons come and neutralize the positive charge of the glass rod. So this phenomenon of sharing the excess charge on a body with the earth is called earthing or grounding. So it is sharing of excess charges on a body with earth. That is what is earthing or grounding. Yeah, we have applications of this earthing or grounding. So when we have charged bodies brought closer to each other or brought in contact with each other, one phenomena that we see is the production of spark. This can be observed when when two pith balls rubbed with different charge with different kind of charge or brought in contact, a small spark is produced. In the same way, if you have observed the fuel carrying trucks, petrol, diesel, LPG, they always have chains that are in contact with the earth while they are moving. Why do you need them? So even though the truck is one as a whole, it has got individual parts in it, and when the truck accelerates and brakes are applied, the individual parts rub with each other. once they rub with each other, yeah, there is a possibility of getting charged. Once they get charged, obviously the possibility of spark is there, where a very small spark is enough to inflame or to explode the truck. So to avoid that, these chains are always put in contact with the earth. So when the charging, even when the charging occurs, if the charging occurs, all the excess charges that are generated due to friction are transferred to earth through these chains, and hence neutralizes, and hence no production of spark, and hence no explosion. So these chains are useful for avoiding explosion by transferring the excess charge produced due to the friction in the container, and once the charges are transferred, we can expect no spark produced, and hence the truck is safer. So this is one application of earthing, and obviously we use earthing and grounding in our home and buildings. Now, as of the current discussion, what we know is that two bodies can be charged using the method of rubbing them with each other, right? Glass rod, silk cloth, plastic rod, cat's fur. If I say, are there any other methods of charging a body? Yes, there are different methods of charging body. Rubbing is one of the method. So now let us look into different methods of charging the body. Basically, we have three methods of charging. The first method of charging that we have is what we have discussed so far, which is charging by friction. So it's the friction which converts mechanical energy into thermal energy, and hence the electrons gain that energy to jump from one body to the other body. The body which loses the electron becomes positively charged, and the body which gains the electron becomes negatively charged. And the phenomena is called charging by friction. Since we have discussed the same phenomena till now, I am not going deep into it. It's simple. We have discussed it in detail as of now. Now it's the rubbing, the same rubbing method, which is charging by friction. The second method is charging by conduction. So in order to charge a body using this method of conduction, we need to have a body which is already charged using, say, method of friction. Say I have a charged plastic rod, a negatively charged plastic rod, and I have a metal sphere. Okay, this metal sphere is placed on an insulated stand. The reason being, no charge is transferred to the earth when this metal sphere gets charged. Okay, now my intention is to charge this metal sphere. I cannot charge this metal sphere by rubbing it because it's a metal. There are free electrons, they go and come back, so it's not possible. What is the other method of charging this metal sphere? Yes, I can charge this metal sphere by bringing this plastic rod, charged plastic rod, in contact with this metal sphere. I just need to touch this plastic rod, the charged plastic rod, to this metal sphere, and hence the negative charge from the plastic rod will now transfer into the metal sphere. So these negative charges will come and deposit on the metal sphere chosen. Since this method involves bringing two bodies in contact, we name this as charging by the method of conduction. Here the charges are conducted, they are actually moving from one body to the other body. Okay, so charging by conduction involves bringing a charged body in contact with a metal sphere, and hence the charges present on the body will transfer into the metal sphere. So the metal sphere is now a charged one. Okay, we remove this glass rod, plastic rod, and we'll be left with a charged metal sphere, negatively charged metal sphere in this example. So this is charging by conduction, by actual physical contact. Now moving ahead, the next method of charging a body is charging by induction. Whenever the concept of induction comes, we actually see things like there will be no physical contact of two bodies, okay, and the same thing follows here. Charging a body without the actual physical contact between any two bodies is named as charging by induction, okay, charging a body without bringing a charged body in contact with it. So we are going to induce the charge in it. So let me explain charging by induction. So in order to charge a body using the method of induction, again we need to have a charged body with us, which is already charged using some method of from the previous two of them, either by friction or by conduction. We should have a charged body with us. Now let us assume we have two metal spheres, say metal sphere A and metal sphere B in contact with each other, and both of them are neutral in nature. None of them has got any charge in them. Now a charged body, say a charged plastic rod or a charged glass rod, is brought closer to one of the metal sphere, not in contact but brought closer to one of the metal sphere out of these two. Okay, this is the first step. Bring a charged body close to, not in contact, remember, close to one of the metal sphere. Now the metal sphere to which the glass rod is brought closer will now acquire a particular kind of charge. What kind of charge will it acquire? See, now it's like a connected pool of charges. Here electrons are free to move and glass rod is brought closer to B, and hence obviously unlike charges attract each other, so electrons from both A and B, few of the electrons, will now get transferred and will come and deposit on this closer end of sphere B. So they will come and more number of electrons can be found here, and positive charge and positive charge they tend to repel each other, because like charges repel each other, and hence we can see the deposition of positive charge on the far end of sphere A. See, because this is happening because they were both A and B were neutral in nature. Glass rod, a positively charged glass rod was brought close to B. The electrons are now transferred, few of the electrons, not all of them, few of the electrons have transferred from this part of metal sphere A to this part of metal sphere B. Now this has got individually, metal sphere B has got extra negative charge and metal sphere A individually has got extra positive charge. Now if I remove this glass rod, what happens? They actually come back and neutralize with each other, no big deal. Now if instead of removing the glass rod, okay, keeping the glass rod in its position, the second step, keeping the glass rod in its position, break the contact of these two metal spheres, move them away from each other. Okay, one should not actually move the glass rod. Glass rod should be held close to B. It should kept holding close to B, and these metal spheres A and B should be moved away from each other. Once they are moved away from each other, there tend to be they now cannot exchange the charges because it's air between them. Air is very bad conductor of charges, it cannot transfer charges, so the positive charges are stuck inside A and the negative charges are stuck inside B, and hence now we can remove the glass rod. So glass rod is removed. Finally we have two charged bodies. Once the glass rod is removed, they'll rearrange themselves uniformly spread over the surface of metal spheres. So now we have two charged bodies of two different kinds. So now A is a body which is positively charged and B is a body which is negatively charged. Here compared to the previous two methods, we have not lost anything in the process, because when we are charging we need to do the physical work, manual work has to be done. When we are charging by conduction, charge from the glass rod or the plastic rod is lost, and that is what is making the other body, the metal sphere, charged. The same charge is transferred to this, so glass rod will lose the charge when it comes to conduction. But when it comes to induction, no body is going to lose the charge. Like glass rod is not losing its charge, it will regain its charge till the end and after the phenomena. But it can actually this method can actually produce two charged bodies without actually losing the charge in the original body. So this is the method of induction. First, two metal spheres, uncharged metal sphere brought in contact, a charged glass rod or a plastic rod brought closer to one of the metal sphere. Now assume that B is the one which is closer to the glass rod brought, so B will acquire negative charge on its end, on this end, and A will acquire positive charge in this end. Now keeping glass rod in its position, separate the spheres A and B. Now remove the glass rod, we have two spheres A and B charged with different kind of charge, positive and negative. So these are the three different methods of charging a body: friction, conduction and induction. When it comes to charging by induction, we also have a different way of charging a body in induction method itself, because in the previous case we were supposed to have two bodies in contact with each other, so that we charge them in two metal spheres in contact with each other, so that we charge them using induction. We have to include two metal spheres for the method. Now what if we have only one metal sphere and we need to charge it using the method of induction? Say we have one big metal sphere and we need to charge it using the method of induction. Now when we have only one metal sphere, earthing helps us to charge this body. Now the same method is applied, repeated, like a charged body or charged glass rod is brought closer, not in contact, close to one end of the metal sphere, and hence this end of the metal sphere will now have more negative charge and this end of the metal sphere will now have more positive charge in it. So this is how charges will redistribute, because few electrons from this part will come and accumulate here. Now this is the first method: bring a charged body close to an uncharged metal sphere, so that the charges inside them are redistributed in this way. I mean, negative charge will come and acquire in this end, positive will acquire in this end. Now keeping the glass rod in its position, okay, the position of the glass rod shall be retained. Glass rod shall be kept in its position, so that the negative charges are still held by this glass rod. You earth the other end of the metal sphere. Now these additional positive charges that we had will now transfer into the earth through this metal wire. We have earthed this metal sphere from this end, so that these negative charges are held by the glass rod. They are still held by the glass rod, but these positive charges are transferred to the earth and hence are lost. So keeping the glass rod in its position, disconnect earthing. So keeping the glass rod in its position, disconnecting the earthing, will be having only negative charge left in the metal sphere. Now I can remove the glass rod from its position now, and hence finally I'll be left with a body with a negative kind of charge distributed over it uniformly. The difference from the previous method, it's actually the same method, the induction one, two ways. The first way using two bodies, two metal spheres. The second way is using a single body, single metal sphere and earthing. Okay, so this is how we can actually charge a metal sphere using the method of induction and the phenomenon of earthing. These are the different stages of it. Now let us look into the properties of these electric charges. We have so many properties, like 5 to 6. Out of them we are going to choose and discuss which are very important and mathematically significant one. The first is very simple one, doesn't require any mathematics to understand, and we have already understood that. Very simple property of charges: like charges repel and unlike charges attract. Very simple property of charge: positive positive repel, positive negative attract, negative negative repel. The second property of charge is charges are additive in nature. What do you mean by additivity or additive property? So two charged bodies share their charges when they are brought in contact in such a way that two numerical values get add up with each other. For example, say I have a charge of plus q in one body, and let me take that as q1, plus q1 in one body and plus q2 on the other body. When they are brought in contact with each other, they share the charge. Together they possess the charge which is sum of these two charges. The net charge from these two charged bodies is now q1 plus q2. This is the net charge. Now charges can be both positive and negative, we know that. So what if I bring a positive charged body with a charge plus q1 and a negative charged body with a charge minus q2 in it? Then the net charge left from the combination is q1 minus q2. Okay, here when it comes to additive property of the charge, it is actually sign sensitive. If the charge is positive, we need to retain positive. If the charge is negative, we need to retain negative. So if both of them are positive, that's finally some higher positive charge from the combination. And if both of them are one of them is positive and the other is negative, then it's the difference of them which gives us the net charge due to the combination. And similarly, when we have two negative charged bodies brought in contact, say minus q1 minus q2 brought in contact will produce a net charge of minus q1 minus q2. So the final net charge would be obviously negative itself, and that is how charges add up with each other. Taking an example now, say I have brought a body of plus 10 microcoulomb and minus 3 microcoulomb in contact. Once they are brought in contact, the net charge due to the combination is plus 10 minus 3, which is equal to plus 7 microcoulomb. This is the net charge due to the combination. Putting them together, 7 microcoulomb is the net charge. At the same time, if this is plus 3, then it would be plus 10 plus 3 plus 13 microcoulomb. And looking at the order of charge that we consider while taking the example, it's always in the order of micro, nano, pico, sometimes milli. Okay, because 1 coulomb is really huge charge, which is normally not found in nature practically. So the amount of charge that we normally observe in nature is always in the order of milli, micro, nano and pico. 10 to the power of minus 3, minus 6, minus 9, minus 12. Normally it is kept in this order when we take the examples and in practical. So this is the second property, charges are additive in nature. Now, third property is charges are conserved in nature. Now, what do you mean by the law of conservation? We already know the law of conservation applied for different physical quantities like momentum and energy. Energy is always conserved. You cannot create energy and you cannot destroy energy. You can actually transform it. In the same way, charges can neither be created nor be destroyed. They can be transferred from one body to the other body, which we have seen in the previous examples discussed. And the body which is losing the electron is becoming positively charged, and the body which is gaining the electrons is becoming negatively charged. So electrons are the charges which are actually moving from one body to the other body. Here we are neither creating those electrons nor destroying those electrons from the one body and the other body. So we are just transferring electrons from one body to the other body. So in an isolated system, the net charge is always conserved. That's the other way of looking into conservation. In an isolated system, the net charge always remains the same. This is the other way of looking into it. You cannot create and destroy. That is one way of looking into conservation property, and the other way of looking into it is the net charge is always remains the same. What's an isolated system here? When it comes to isolated system of charges, it means that there is no earthing or grounding in the system. So now assume that you had two neutral bodies. Okay, let me consider neutral body itself. Say a glass rod which is not rubbed yet with the silk cloth. Okay, now these two bodies before rubbing will not have any charge in them. So let me consider these two put together as a system of bodies. After rubbing, glass rod and silk cloth will acquire positive and negative charges respectively. Now, if glass rod acquires say plus Q amount of charge, silk cloth will acquire minus Q amount of charge. The phenomena we have done here is rubbing, or the method of friction is followed, and before rubbing the net charge of the system is 0 plus 0 is equal to 0 units. Yeah, we'll discuss the unit of charge now, which is coulomb. So it's 0 coulomb. This is before the glass rod and the silk cloth are rubbed with each other, and after they are rubbed with each other, it's plus Q and minus Q, which is again equal to 0 coulomb. So this, in this system, there is no destruction or construction of charge as a whole, because even before rubbing it was 0 coulomb together, and after rubbing it's 0 coulomb. So it's the amount of charge remained the same. So this property is the conservation property of the charges. Okay, and the next property of charges is charges are quantized in nature. What do you mean by quantization? This might be new for you. Let me give you an example. That is, assume that I have a basket of small balls, say each ball weighing 3 gram. Okay, basket of ball, each ball weighing 3 gram. Now out of this I randomly take some amount of balls, say 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and give that to you. Now if I ask a yes or no question like, is it possible that you have a mass of 15 gram in your hand? Is there any possibility? Yes, there is a possibility, you say. Yes, because if I have given you 5 balls, then it's 15 gram together. If I ask you, is there any possibility that you have 4 grams or say 8 grams in your hand? 8 grams is not at all possible, because each ball weighs 3 gram, and any number of balls put together will not make the total mass equal to 8 gram. So here the mass in your hand is quantized to 3 gram. Either it should be 3 gram or multiple of 3 gram. Similarly, whatever the charge that we see in nature is quantized to a basic value. Okay, that value is nothing but the charge of each electron. So quantization of charge says that any amount of charge, or any charge, I can say any charge found in nature is integral multiple of a basic charge. Okay, here this basic mass in this example, the basic mass was 3 gram, right? Here similarly there is a basic charge which actually builds the total charge in the body. So this basic charge is nothing but the charge of an electron, which is 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 19 coulomb. So it's actually minus 1.6 charge of an electron. So this is the basic charge, and any amount of charge that we find in nature is integral multiple of this charge, and hence we come to the formula of Q is equal to NE, where N is the number of electrons that have transferred from one body to the other body, Q is the total charge acquired by the body, E is the charge of an electron. Okay. Now when it comes to plastic rod and the cat sphere, electrons are actually transferring from cat sphere to the plastic rod. Say, just for example, if I assume that 10 electrons, 100 electrons got transferred from cat sphere to the plastic rod. Okay. Then what's happening here? What is the amount of charge gained by both of them? So cat sphere will acquire a charge of Q is equal to NE, which is equal to 100 times the charge of electron, 100 into 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 19, which is equal to 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 17 coulomb. Right. So this is the amount of charge acquired by cat sphere, positive, because it is losing the electron. Now the amount of charge acquired by the plastic rod is same, because cat sphere has lost 100 electrons, plastic rod has gained 100 electrons, which means the charge acquired by cat sphere is plus 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 17 coulomb, and the charge acquired by the plastic rod is minus 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 17 coulomb, because it is gaining the electrons. Since it is losing the electron, positive, it is gaining the electron, negative. So this is the fourth property of charges, and we can see problems based on this. Let me take a simple problem based on the quantization property of the charge. Say a plastic rod has acquired a charge of 160 picocoulomb. Estimate the number of electrons that have transferred from the plastic rod to the silk cloth. So this is the total charge acquired by the glass rod. A glass rod has acquired a charge of 160 picocoulomb. Estimate the number of electrons transferred. So from the formula, it's Q is equal to NE. N becomes equal to Q by E. Q is 160 into 10 to the power of minus 12. E is 1.6 into 10 to the power of minus 19. So N becomes equal to hundreds are minus 19 comes to the numerator, becomes plus 19. 19 plus 2, 21, 21 minus 12 is 9. So these many electrons are transferred from glass rod to silk cloth when the glass rod acquires 160 picocoulomb of charge. Okay. So now we'll look into a law which gives us the idea of amount of force that acts between two charged bodies. Till now we do know that two charged bodies experience force between them. If they are like charges, then they will repel. If they are unlike charges, they will attract. But we don't know what is the amount of charge that is that gives rise to the different forces that we see, or I can say what is the amount of force that acts between those two charged bodies, exact numerical value, and that exact numerical value of the force between two charged bodies shall be found using Coulomb's law. Coulomb gave us the idea of the force between two charged bodies. By using inverse square law. Let us go into the law. Before we go into the law, let me give you the idea that the unit of charge, okay, the SI unit of charge is named after the same scientist, Coulomb, represented by capital C. This is the SI unit, and charge is actually a scalar quantity. Right now, assume that two charges Q1 and Q2 are separated by a distance of r between them. Now, what is the amount of force that acts between those two charges? Don't need to worry about whether the force is attractive or repulsive through this Coulomb's law, because the kind of force can be easily judged by looking into the kind of charges deposited. If they are like, they will repel; if they are unlike, they will attract. And hence, what we are concerned about is the amount of force. So Coulomb's law gives us the idea of that. This is somewhat very similar to that of Newton's gravitational law. We can see that Coulomb is more influenced by Newton's law of gravitation and gave us this idea, very similar to that of Newton's law of gravitation. So Coulomb suggests that the Coulomb's law of electrostatic force says that the electrostatic force between two charged bodies is directly proportional to product of magnitude of the charges, and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. This is what we are very familiar with when it comes to Newton's law of gravitation, or I can say between their centers. So when it comes to Newton's law of gravitation, instead of charges we had mass, and the same kind of inverse square law is taken, which is inversely proportional to 1 by r square. So this is Coulomb's law of electrostatics. Electrostatic force between two charged bodies is directly proportional to the product of magnitude of charges and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Now, looking into the math part now, F, the force, amount of force, is directly proportional to Q1, Q2. And the second part of this law states it's inversely proportional to r squared. Keeping them together, F proportional to, the force proportional to Q1, Q2 by r squared. So this is where we come when it comes to proportionality or dependence of force on the charge. How about removing the proportionality? Obviously, when we want to remove the proportionality, we need to introduce a constant, and the constant that we introduce here is 1 by 4 pi epsilon. Okay, this is a new term for you, epsilon. This is not E, this is C, where you have a line in the middle. Okay. Okay, that is what is epsilon. 1 by 4 pi epsilon q1 q2 by r square. This is the formula for force acting between two charged bodies. F is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon q1 q2 by r square from Coulomb's law. We'll discuss about this epsilon in detail now. Before we go for the discussion of epsilon, let me represent Coulomb's law in vector form. Okay, Coulomb's law in vector form is now written as, okay, whenever we want to represent Coulomb's law in vector form, we should have the idea of the kind of charges. For now, let us assume that both of them are positive in nature, and obviously they tend to repel each other. So the direction of force on one particular charged body or one particular charge chosen shall be in this way. So this is the direction of force acting on charge plus q1, and obviously this is the direction of force acting on q2. Now let me write the let me assume that the vector, this vector from q1 to q2, drawn from q1 to q2, represented by r12. R12 gives us the idea of distance of separation between them. Now you can see that the force always acts along this vector drawn from one charge to the other charge, the distance of separation. Okay, so this force always, it doesn't act like this or like this. It's always on the line joining those two charges. So either it's in the direction of r12 or it's in the direction opposite to that of r12, the force. It's always like that. So first let me consider the force experienced by charge q1 due to charge q2, force on q1 due to q2. Let me put that as force F12. F12 is force experienced by charge 1 due to charge 2 is equal to, the magnitude part is quite simple, 1 by 4 pi epsilon q1 q2 by r square. Now when it comes to specifying the direction of force, since the chosen charges are of opposite kind, same kind, positive and positive, they repel, and hence the direction of force is like this. This direction of force is exactly opposite to that of this r12. So now I should put minus r12 cap. If you choose r12 to be written like this, then it's plus r12. Don't need to worry. Okay, you should have clear idea about vectors before coming here. Okay, now and even when they are unlike charges, this is going to be positive for the same case. Now this is what is F12, and this is what we are going to consider now as F21. Okay, this is the unit vector of r12, or I can simply put that as vector r. Okay, don't need to get confused, r12 and all. Vector r is fine. So this is vector r, drawn from first charge to the second charge. Now force experienced by second charge due to the first charge, force experienced by second charge due to the first charge in this direction is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon q1 q2 by r square. It's equal in magnitude, but the direction is exactly the opposite to that of F12, and hence possess the same direction as of r. The direction of r is like this, direction of F12 is also like this, so it's plus r in the unit vector part. So this is the vector representation of Coulomb's law, and from 1 and 2, let me name them as 1 and 2. From these two equations 1 and 2, we can conclude that force experienced by first charge due to the second charge is equal to minus force experienced by second charge due to the first charge. So this is what is Newton's third law. So Newton's third law is valid even for the Coulomb's law. So vector representation of Coulomb's law. Now coming into the constant part, okay, the constant that we saw while writing the Coulomb's law was 1 by 4 pi epsilon. This 4 pi are familiar constants and epsilon is the new one. What is this epsilon? This epsilon refers to permittivity of a medium, of given medium. Okay, this property of permittivity gives us the idea that how able is the medium in order for the exchange of force between two charged bodies. For example, if you keep two charged bodies with air in between them, then there will be a maximum force experienced between them. Then when does the force decrease? You put the same two charged bodies with the same distance of separation, now with water or glass between them. Now the force experienced by the same two charged bodies will be lesser compared to the air medium. So few medium allow this electrostatic force to exchange in an efficient way, and few medium do not allow them to exchange in an efficient way. And this property of allowing the electrostatic forces to exchange is permittivity. How much is the medium permitting the force to act? Now this epsilon is later taken with two terms combined together. Epsilon is equal to epsilon naught into epsilon r. This epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space, okay, which has a particular constant value, which is, I am not going to write the exact value of epsilon naught. Instead, I'll write complete value of 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. Okay, 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught is equal to 9 into 10 to the power of 9 units, which is useful when it comes to solving problems. Now this value, this is what is epsilon naught. What is this epsilon r? This epsilon r and this epsilon naught is actually also referred as absolute permittivity of free space. Okay. So epsilon naught is absolute permittivity of free space. Now you can get the value of epsilon naught out of it, but I'll always suggest to keep the constant value together with 4 pi, so that the value is simple to remember. 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught is equal to 9 into 10 to the power of 9 units. Now coming to epsilon r part. Epsilon r is the relative permittivity of free space. Relative permittivity of given medium. Any medium it is. Epsilon r is the relative value which has no units and dimension, which comes with the absolute value epsilon naught to give the net value of permittivity of the given medium. For example, air has the permittivity, relative permittivity epsilon r equal to 1. both air and vacuum has the relative permittivity epsilon r equal to 1. So epsilon simply becomes equals to epsilon naught when it comes to the medium of air or vacuum. For other medium, you will have different values of epsilon r, which shall be substituted here to get epsilon value, and hence later substitute this epsilon into the value of 1 by 4 pi epsilon while getting to know about the force acting between two charged bodies. So this is about electrical permittivity epsilon. Okay. Now, whatever we discussed in Coulomb's law is about the force that acts between two charged bodies. Now, when we have more than two charged bodies in a system, and if we are trying to find the net force on a particular body, let me write the system of charges distributed. Say I have Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, etc., so on. So many charges distributed in space, and we also have one more charge Q. Now, if I had only Q and Q1, this Q would have experienced a force only due to this charge Q1, which is expected to be in this direction if they are like charges. Let me call that force as F1. And if there were only two charges Q2 and Q in the system, no other charges, if it was in such a way, then this Q would have experienced a force in this direction, which is F2, and similarly it would have experienced F3 here and F4 here. So this is how a single charge would have experienced different forces individually. Now, since all of them are influencing on this charge Q, the net force on the charge considered is equal to vector sum of individual forces due to all the charges present in the system, which means it's not simply the scalar sum, it's the vector sum. Due to charge Q1, it is experiencing F1 force, and due to charge Q2, it's experiencing F2, due to Q3, F3, due to Q4, it is F4. So net charge net force on the charged body Q is vector F1 plus vector F2 plus vector F3 plus so on. Now, this comes from the idea of superposition principle. Superposition principle says that when you have system of charges, the influence of a charge of a charged body or I can say the force experienced by one charge due to the other charge, say from Q, the force experienced by Q due to Q1 is not affected by the presence of other charges Q2, Q3 and Q4, because there will be force acting between this Q1 and Q2, and while considering this charge F1, no need to worry about the charges, the forces that are acting between Q1 and Q2. So individual force act separately, and hence the final net force is vector sum of all the individual forces. and the force between two given charges is not taken into account when it comes to finding the net charge on the other charge, here Q. That is what is superposition principle is. The force between two charges shall be not taken into account while considering the force on a third charge due to these two charges. Now let me write the expression for this net charge due to all the charges. This is actually a multiple charge system. Force in multiple charge system. So which is F is equal to, what is F1 equal to? Quite simple, Coulomb's law. Let us assume that the vector drawn from center of Q1 to Q2, the position vector, the radius vector, I can say, be R1, and the vector drawn from Q2 to Q shall be R2, similarly R3, R4 and all. So this F net force is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon Q1 Q by R1 squared R1 cap. This is what is the expression of F1, right? Q1 Q2 it was in general, and it is Q1 Q because the other charge is Q, plus 1 by 4 pi epsilon, it's the same medium, Q2 Q by R2 squared into R2 cap, and so on. This is what is the expression of F2, right? We do have unit vectors with us, so that it's still vector sum of all the terms. Bringing all the common terms out and placing them in summation, we get the net force F is equal to capital Q, the force on which the charge on which the force is considered, capital Q, by 1 by 4 pi Q by 4 pi epsilon into summation I from 1 to n number of charges, Qi by Ri squared into Ri cap. So this is the final expression for the net force acting on charge Q due to n number of charges present in the system, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, Q5, so on Qn. So this is what is the net force. You can understand it more clearly with the problem solved on this. I can take a simple problem now to understand how it looks like. So let us assume that we have two charges, say plus 1 coulomb, plus 2 coulomb, and one more charge plus 3 coulomb. Now let the angle made by these two radius vectors R1 and R2, and hence the force between the forces, because see this the net force on this plus 1 coulomb is what we are studying now. This plus 2 coulomb charge would push this plus 1 coulomb charge in this direction, right? So this is F, okay, if I call this as charge A and charge B, this is what is Fa, and this plus 3 coulomb would push this in this direction, this is what is Fb. Now that the angle between them is 90 degree, because the radius vector also poses the angle of 90. This is all given data. Now the net force experienced by this plus 1 coulomb charge is the vector sum of due to charge at position A and charge at position B. Let us find Fa and Fb individually first. What is FA from Coulomb's law? It's 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. I'll directly take it as epsilon naught because let me assume that the medium is air. 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q1 q2 by r squared. Right, let me write the formula once. Okay, so FA is 9 into 10 to the power of 9 into, okay, I did not mention the distance of separation, let me keep it simple, 1 meter into, you see, it's 2 into 1 by 1 square, which is 18 into 10 to the power of 9 Newton due to this charge on this charge, FA. This much of force is acting. And similarly, FB, the value of FB, this one, let me keep this as 1 meter itself, is going to be 18 plus, it's 2 times 9, it's going to be 3 times 9, 27 into 10 to the power of 9 Newton. Since the angle between them is 90 degree and it's the vector sum of them, then the net force is given by, the magnitude of net force is given by FA squared plus FB squared, which is under root of 18 squared plus 27 squared. Simplify and solve, you will get the net force. So this is how we can calculate net force on a particular charge due to n number of charges distributed in the system.